Well, there we are. Welcome to another day of the Athens Women's Football Summit. We've been joking. I'm sure, like everybody, we'd love to be in Athens, but maybe one day we'll take the comfort of our homes for right now. And welcome. I'm Jeff Kassouf. I'm founder of Equalizer, the Equalizer, equalizersoccer.com. We've been covering women's soccer since 2009. And you can check us out at equalizersoccer.com/subscribe. But enough about me. I'm joined by three panelists today who are going to bring us a wealth of knowledge from different areas of the business, on the sponsorship side, the business side of women's soccer. So really excited to talk to them, and want to encourage you all too that are watching, listening, to send us your questions. We'll try to get to them at the end and keep it kind of free flowing and hopefully informative for everybody on a really important year for sports, obviously, and in women's soccer. So joined today, I guess we'll go in order of the boxes here. We've got Lindsay Barenz, who is the Vice President of Business Development for the National Women's Soccer League. She's up in your top left there. We've got Jan Twete, Director of Global Partnerships for North America region at VfL Wolfsburg. And we have Jackie Truong, Partnerships Lead for Brand Marketing at Google. All of these folks involved in women's soccer heavily in different ways. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. Hey, everyone.
I thought we'd start, a little bit on the basic level. Maybe we can start first with just, I read each of your titles. I'm sure some folks watching are wondering, what is that in practical terms of what you do, how you're involved in women's soccer and the business side. So maybe if you can each give us a quick brief kind of, what is your day-to-day or hands-on look like in the women's soccer world, and maybe we'll just go in that order of intro. If you want to start, Lindsay, and then Jan and Jackie.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. I am super excited to be here. So thanks to the Athens Women's Football Summit for organizing this, and especially for including a panel on the business side of the game, because I think it's really important that we have these conversations. So at the NWSL, I run the corporate partnerships side of the organization, and that involves everything from cold emails, introducing myself to brands and talking about the NWSL and explaining who we are and what we have to offer, to negotiating deals and having conversations about what types of assets and value we can deliver to particular brands, and each one is unique, all the way to fulfilling our contractual obligations once those partnerships are done and making sure that we deliver the value promised.
Well, I will continue, and actually, just take everything that Lindsay just said, put it into the perspective of a club, exactly the same. So, as you mentioned, thanks for the intro, Jeff. I thought I lost you guys for a couple of seconds there, but I hope you can hear me now. So at VfL Wolfsburg here, and just to give the perspective there. So we're operating several teams from men's team, women's team, and the academy. And we also market all the teams, but I'm heavily involved with the women's team and with the partnerships there. And I think actually our days are pretty similar, if you can even say that, or to some extent in this industry, Lindsay. But it's pretty similar. But I'm obviously on the club side.
Thanks, Al, and thanks, Jeff. Thanks for moderating and introducing us, and really appreciate being here as the rookie on the football side. Coming from Google, we definitely don't get enough football and the game around here. So excited to be here. So I work on brand partnerships at Google for consumer apps. Really what that means is for Google search, maps, photos, and a lot of our non-hardware products, we really find ways to work with brands in entertainment, sports, and lifestyle brands to kind of bring to life some of the products and features that we have and show ways that Google can be helpful. And one of the ways that we actually tie into football and soccer, as us Americans call it, is really figuring out ways to increase fan engagement with our league partners like NWSL. and bring more information to folks where it's helpful. So if you go on search, you'll see some new features for sports and soccer and football. So that's just one way that we do it. But in terms of marketing, we really find ways to get creative with our league and team partners.
Nice. Perfect. Well, I think a good jumping off point there, some words that stuck out to me from all of you really, but the execution of partnerships, right? And in 2020, we've all lived through it personally, professionally of a challenging year, but I think some opportunities as they relate to our sport. I think, in women's soccer has been nimble has been the word that's been tossed around, but, I think there's been some ability to adapt and capitalize. So I'm wondering, we can start in maybe general terms and then we'll get into some specifics, which I'm sure people are interested in. Obviously partnerships between folks or brands on this panel that we can talk about. But from a business perspective, we're in the Q4 here. What has 2020 been like for you? Maybe even just for women's soccer as a whole. And Lindsay, if you want to start, we can go in the same order for this one too, maybe just for sake of ease, but what has 2020 been like from a business perspective in women's soccer?
Well, I wouldn't presume to speak for all of women's soccer. I'm sure that each league and each country has had their own challenges that have varied widely. We in the United States have particularly a hard time have had a particularly hard time in the pandemic. So our year started off with the hiring of a new commissioner, Lisa Baird, and in her first week on the job, she had to suspend our season. So she's been in crisis management mode the entire time, but perhaps counterintuitively has come up with some incredible ways to market the league, even in this time of crisis. So we are in the first year of our broadcast partnerships with CBS and Twitch, and with our Challenge Cup that we hosted in Harriman, Utah, saw the two largest audiences that the league's ever had in our opening and closing games on CBS. And it is not an exaggeration to say that those broadcast partnerships are game-changing for our league. And we continued into our fall series and have continued to set record audience numbers with our broadcasts on CBS, and have also been able to include some US distribution with Twitch. And we're super excited about putting our games on Twitch, which is an extremely innovative streaming platform and does a really good job at building community with a live chat that follows the entirety of the game. So we've had to be nimble and, think creatively in ways that I think none of us anticipated. But overall, it's, again, in a way that's very counterintuitive to the situation that we all face, been an extremely successful year for the league.
And Jan, similarly on a club level?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this has been a roller coaster probably for every one of us. And to be honest, still, I have to say, I expected the whole situation to be a lot worse when we're thinking back to March when all this happened. And actually, it really kept us busy. I mean, there was a lot to figure out and obviously a lot of adversity to overcome. But the good thing in our case was, and obviously, I mean, I'm now the one here on this panel. I mean, I'm located in Germany, and I think we handled it here fairly well in general. So, but still, we had the sports hiatus. Our games were paused as well. But we tried just everything to keep our partners happy, keep them engaged, our fans as well. And actually, we're pretty grateful because in our case, our league, the women's league in Germany, was pretty much the only women's league that actually continued their season when all the other ones canceled. And this was for us, and also the teams pushed for it, and also the men's side of the clubs, of the leagues actually helped that the women's league can continue. So all in all, I think this was an amazing sign and also commitment into what we're trying to build here with women's soccer as a platform. So that was obviously good, and we could finish our season. We had no case at all on the women's side, and were able, obviously without fans, but we were able to finish the season. And we won the title, so we're happy about that. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. You probably all know about that. I mean, then the Champions League tournament, where we were also part of, was kind of pushed back after this season. So we kind of ended our season, had a break, had to prepare again for the tournament in a kind of bubble style, like with the NBA and so on, in Spain. Then we came back, had like 2 days off, and then the new season started. So schedules are completely weird, and we're just trying to plan with different scenarios. But all in all, yeah, it could have been much worse, I think.
Yeah. And Jackie, I'm wondering, you deal with a lot of different entities. Anything that you've seen different in this realm of the sports world that maybe is encouraging or just unique?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if we start really macro, Google is doing a lot of different things around this time frame. Obviously, even if we think about our partnerships, we're currently partners with NBA and MLB here, the baseball league in the U.S. And a lot of what we had to try to do is kind of figure out and mostly focus, right? Like, what can we do? What do we know? How do the partners want to kind of prioritize different aspects of the partnerships? Unfortunately, even the All-Star game, which, we do a lot of voting for Google, for MLB was canceled. And that was something that we really had to figure out too. Like, what were the more important and priority types of projects that we wanted to focus on and shift our efforts towards. So when we spoke with Lindsay about the opportunity to be part of the Challenge Cup, it was really about being like the first ones to really try this out too, in terms of in the US for a live tournament with players in a bubble, and really figuring out as we went. And from a partner perspective, we just wanted to be helpful however we could. Like, we came up with all kinds of ideas. I know that a lot of our early brainstorms were like, if fans can't be there, how can we help them be there? And how can we help bring that spirit back? Because everyone was really hungry for that. And obviously it changes the game when you can't have that energy. So it was really interesting to have challenges, but it also helped us be, as Lindsay and Jan brought up too, like more creative and had to pivot. And it kind of gives you a focus, right? Like, if you just have a problem at hand that everyone's really looking at together, it actually brings a lot more, I think, in terms of like productive ideas for progression forward versus like trying to attack like all the things we could do. It was more so, what are the most important things we should do?
Yeah, maybe one of those. I know people who say, just give me a deadline. I'm better under deadline than just an open palette. So,
yeah.
Well, we've alluded to the partnership a little bit, but let's talk about Google being a sponsor of the NWSL, and I'm sure Lindsay will add to this if I forget any, but the league, the NWSL, was able to add several national sponsors in an otherwise challenging time. Google being one of maybe the biggest names among a lot of big names. And I'm wondering, Jackie, what was important? You touched on it a little bit, but what was important about Google getting involved in the NWSL? You mentioned it being the first tournament, but maybe on a broader lens here of, I think that the biggest problem maybe in women's soccer, women's sports, as somebody in the media even, is that there's not enough coverage of it and it's hard to find. And I'm sure you've heard the things like, I search for something and I get, I search for the Man United Chelsea score and I'm getting the men's game, but I wanted the women's, and, it's just kind of accessibility. So was that something important to Google in terms of forging a partnership and trying to help just get visibility to the league?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons we were involved. I mean, as much as we're new to the space in women's football and soccer in general, I think we more so trying to figure out in the sports world, how can some of the tools on search, even as you mentioned, be better at providing the information to people in a way that is accessible and more equitable. So like finding ways to make sure that matches are not prioritizing men's over women's. And you'll see that what we did recently with some of the tennis tournaments too. And obviously with NWSL, we wanted to make sure that when you were searching for the games, you could find them and know where to watch them. So that was part of the partnership. It's an intent to get involved. We started talking with the NWSL last year around sponsoring the starting lineup for the finals. And that was a great way for us to just kind of dip our toes in the water and say, like, we want to work together. We know it's because not only is equity an important element of making sure that women are represented in the sports sponsorship world, but also that there's so much on the business side of like being really thoughtful about the type of audience we can engage and the type of fandom and spirit that's really behind what people are looking for in women's football that's really unique to women's football, not just because we want women to have more visibility, but because it's an exciting game and NWSL has that momentum that we are really, really excited to be a part of. So after that first kind of smaller sponsorship and partnership that we had, we've been chatting for a little while of like, how do we kind of kick this off together? How do we really get involved in a meaningful way? And then the pandemic happened and it kind of shifted a lot of ways of thinking of what's really important to people right now and what's important to us as a brand, and being able to be supportive and say, like, not only do we want to find ways for our product to elevate ways that you can find women's matches and in tournaments, but also in our marketing and in our commitment. And this is the first way that we can show that with our tools, like the Google Meet integration was just an idea and a brainstorm, but it was also like a time when everyone was shifting towards video calling, right? So it became something that we knew we just wanted to be a part of, and mostly as a brand really partner up with the league. So it's, a few different elements, but I would say on the brand side, it was really important to show up and support. And the product side, it was just something that we're continuously evolving. We hope to continue to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. And Lindsay nodding her head there, I'm sure, with, you mentioned the Google Meet. I know, I think the NBA had this kind of very prominently featured on the sideline, but the NWSL as well, behind the goal, I know in Utah, where there was kind of a box of fans, little boxes of fans as they cheered along. Lindsay, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that, and also, I'm sure we have some business nerds kind of listening in. Is there anything, KPIs or anything that you could share that you really have been happy with, whether it's Google specific or just, in general for, the league this year?
Oh, I could spend the remainder of the time talking about Google. So I have lots to say. It is really hard to put yourself back in where we were in April. We think now, bubbles work. We know they work. The NBA's done it. The WNBA's done it. How do you integrate fans? You do a Google Meet and you put it on your broadcast and on social and on the video board. That stuff did not exist in April. We had this concept when we were talking to P&G in secret that we wanted to try to figure out a way to incorporate our fans into the game, both from the sense that we wanted to give our fans that experience, but also that we wanted to make it as festive and exciting an environment as possible for our players who were playing in empty stadiums. So with Secret and P&G, we were like, yeah, let's do that. And then we talked to Google and it was like, how do we do that? and that really hadn't happened before. We had seen some video boards in European football, but we had done nothing in the United States and it had been very limited globally. And, we come up with this concept of the Google Meet, and literally we had a call at one point with like 30 people on it, engineers and, our staff down at Vista who are our game producers. And, we really developed out of nothing this concept of inviting these fans and, literally a script of how the event would go, and created it out of nothing. And having a partner like Google who's willing to engage in that kind of creative thinking and problem solving and put internal resources outside of their marketing department on a task that is going to help the league connect to its fans, provide this festive environment for the players, and really allow us to engage in our fans in a totally new way that had never existed before. And I think one impact of the pandemic is that, everything's gone digital, everything's gone online, and we are just uniquely suited to thrive in that environment. I tell people all the time, we have very respectable number of eyeballs on our league, given the status of how many years we've been involved and the state of, women's sports and the attention it gets in the media. We're a totally respectable number of eyeballs, but nobody beats us when it comes to engagement. Nobody. Our engagement numbers are off the charts. And if you Google the NWSL and Secret deodorant, you will find tweets of people saying, I'm going out and buying Secret deodorant because they are a supporter of the NWSL. I'm going out to buy Budweiser. I love Nike because they support the NWSL. Everybody already uses Google, so that's not like a new thing, but other leagues don't have that kind of commitment from their fan base to their partners. And, we have a uniquely informed and engaged fan base. People who are fans of women's soccer are deeply fans of it, and they want the league to succeed. And they know that our corporate partnerships being successful are a key to the league being successful. We literally have market surveys that show this. And we have third parties who've done surveys of fans that show that women's soccer and the NWSL are at the top of the heap when it comes to sponsor friendliness in terms of fans and leagues. So engaging in this way digitally has been a very successful execution for us during the pandemic. And it's something that I believe we've learned so much that these lessons are going to continue to serve us very well far beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, it sounds like my ongoing pitch when I'm talking to other media outlets about engagement over scale, because it is something very unique to women's soccer, I think, and we've seen it. I think a lot of people watching have probably seen those. I'll give a shout out to those Zoomph, those numbers, those figures that I think are public. I know the NWSL has done their own internal reviews and surveys and studies, and I've seen it, personally. Even we've got, we did a reader survey, and 93% of our readers said they would support a brand that financially supported us, which I think is consistent with, across the sport, as you've said. So, Jan, I'm wondering, you mentioned that you were back, or really Germany never really left in some ways. I mean, you played through this to get the season done. You had to kind of come back for that mini Champions League, finishing, the final 8 there. But in some ways, Lindsay was talking about things that didn't exist, 8 months ago, and that had to be figured out. I know that leagues in the U.S. were looking to those who kind of played through. I think Germany was maybe atop the list. What was being done there? How were things working? Even if that was from a testing perspective. But how did you, what did you take from those early days where everything was so uncertain and you all played through it? I imagine the business front was very challenging at that time, right?
Yeah, I mean, you and Lindsay said that. I mean, I can totally agree with that, and also through the lens of a club, we can see that here as well, that the engagement is just there, and this is amazing, and people need to understand this, that this is a unique opportunity, and this is no kind of trend that happens right now. Also, you had the World Cup, which had a huge engagement on social media. You have the NWSL with everything they are doing, huge engagement. We see that as well. If we just look into our men's and women's team, of course, there are more fans or maybe more eyeballs on the men's team, but the engagement with the women's team is just amazing. So I couldn't agree more with what you just said. But yeah, to get to your point, I mean, obviously, yeah, it was challenging. We have to say we haven't played through it. We had to stop for like 2.5 months as well, until we had to take the time. I mean, it was, I don't want to say similar, but in a way it is to the states in the United States. We have 16 states in Germany, and there were some overall government related guidelines, of course, but in the end, all clubs had to figure it out with their local governments and with their local authorities. And this kind of process of getting everything in place, and obviously, yeah, it was like a week-to-week thing, right? You never knew what's going to happen and what happens with the cases, and there was so much uncertainty. And you had, I mean, it's not that we are through it. As of right now as well, we have to plan with 2-3 different scenarios on how we deal with bringing fans back to a certain extent and cases increasing and what happened. But in the end, as I mentioned earlier, I think the thing that stood out is that there was unity among the teams, and even between men's and women's teams and leagues and associations, that we just wanted to do our homework, let's put it like that, and try everything that we can in terms of preparation, safety protocols, guidelines to try everything that we can to make this happen. And we haven't played in a bubble style, so teams were traveling throughout Germany for the league, and still it worked out perfectly fine. I mean, of course, teams were kind of isolated, but it worked well. And let's see how this continues now. But we're really glad that we were able to finish the season.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on a little bit of the uniqueness of the women's game, and I want to jump off from that point, Jan. Wolfsburg, perennial Champions League challengers, contenders, whatever word you want to use, very frequently a finalist. Got to get Lyon out of the way for you all to lift that trophy. I guess you're probably tired of seeing them, but success usually sells, right? Or you would hope that it would. And a club that's in the Champions League final, top of the continent, constantly should be sellable. I'm wondering if that is the case, how much that has helped that level of success. Obviously, you've had success on the men's side as well, and there's a bigger scale of following there, as you mentioned. But what are some of the challenges you've seen in partnerships on the women's side? And maybe if you can speak to as well, I've seen a lot of co-branding, if you will, that you have partners or brands, maybe sponsors, that you have men's and women's players side by side as kind of one club. Is that something that's very specific and pointed that you're looking to do, or is that brands coming to you and wanting that? What does that look like?
Yeah, happy to dive a bit deeper into that. I mean, first of all, I would lie if I would say the sport of success doesn't help, right? I mean, we all know that, and it's important, and we achieved to be now in this kind of position that everyone knows that we are one of the best teams in the world. And yeah, shout out to Lyon. I mean, they're doing an amazing job on and off the pitch. We have to admit that. And the last 5 years were kind of tough. It was just a matter when we're facing them in the Champions League. But we're super proud of the team and how it performs every day. It's amazing. But to get back to your point again, I think in general, and I try to put this brief because this is also something I could go on now for another hour, but you see definitely a trend or change of perspective in the recent 2 to 3 years. And exactly as you mentioned, so we for example, we have no dedicated sales team for the women's team, because also in this kind of case, we treat it equally and we market it equally. And of course, it really depends on what brands want and what's important for them. And if we can, of course, we like to do activations together with both teams. Some brands also say we just want to do exclusively stuff with the women's team. Some just want to do something with the men's team, maybe when it's just about reach. But we always try to market the women's equally and also promote that in that way. But what you can see, and I don't want this to sound too harsh, but unfortunately, it's kind of a fact. When I think 3 years back, it was rather like you look for a brand. And the main discussion was always around the men's team. And then you kind of throw a couple of the women's assets in there because you have to market them anyway, right? There's signage in the stadium and so on. And this sounds too hard, but unfortunately it's the case. And it was not that easy to market these assets because the visibility wasn't there, the platform wasn't there. And for brands, it was back then, and it's not that long ago, but not that important. But you can see this change, and it's a good change, and it's the right direction that we're heading, that also we're getting actively approached and getting inquiries about the women's team to learn more because they see the opportunities and the values in that, and that sponsorships and women's soccer are actually pretty unique, and you can activate in an amazing style and also kind of in a different way than when you compare to the men's team.
Jeff, you're on mute now.
Sorry about that. I've been impressed from afar about UEFA with what they've done. From unbundling, so to speak, the women's game, the Champions League, the women's Euros, and actually proving the value of those assets. It's something we've seen that probably needs to be done more with FIFA, with the World Cups, maybe even closer to home with U.S. soccer. But been really impressed with what that's looked like and how they've gone about doing that, and they've been able to sign deals at a confederation level anyway. With Visa jumps to mind. I believe Nike was another. So as you said, Jan, there's maybe unique opportunities, and they're no longer just an add-on, but now we can actually see the value in them. And I want to talk, and I guess I'll remind, we do have a question. I see one. If you have any questions, if you're listening to us, watching us here, send them on Twitter, send them on Facebook, send them in this comments section on the stream, and we'll try to get them asked. And I do see we have one that we'll work in. But I want to ask you, because you alluded to it, Jan, and maybe we can start with Jackie from there's been a reluctance in the past, maybe to invest in women's sports, in women's soccer, and I think from my perspective on the media side, I've always seen it as a lack of knowledge necessarily, that there just wasn't an awareness or an understanding of what is this going to do for us, what's the ROI, right? Was this, I don't know how high level, you were leading these talks, but from what you know and what you can share, is there a certain level of having to take a leap to make people understand there is value here? We're going to have to prove it. There's not necessarily a model to show you that this has happened in the past, but if we do this, we can be leaders in the space. Do you have to is there a convincing of that sort at a corporate level?
I think in general, every type of new partnership, there's a level of educating folks on the value that I or my team may see in it. But it certainly in this case, it was more about we talked a lot, everyone here mentioned engagement over scale. But I think when you have a quality of engagement, it can scale, and it's not in the traditional media sense of, impressions and CPM. So the great thing about being in a position and with a team and with my leadership group that really values engagement is figuring out what is the business model for this type of partnership, because we're trying so many different things. Just even with Challenge Cup, it wasn't a traditional multi-year season long official partnership, right? It was how do we show up for this tournament? And so it was really about what type of level of engagement and quality of engagement can we learn from of what we've kind of done in the past, and what we're kind of doing now is all pretty new. The level of convincing was more around, can we really make a statement internally and externally that we are here to support the NWSL for all the reasons we've mentioned prior, but also because we do want to continuously find ways to support different areas in sports, and particularly underrepresented, I would say talent and just athletes and teams and leagues in general, because it's not just about always putting our logos and products in places that people expect to see, but being able to find different ways our products can help and represent different folks in different backgrounds. So I think it was, while it may not be a hard metric for ROI to show that representation, it certainly is a valuable one, and it doesn't take much convincing to do that, but definitely want to be able to show the quality of engagement and the type of content that we could create together is another piece. We were really able to work with Lindsay and the league and a really incredible players that wanted to participate to support local businesses and small businesses, which is something that we don't typically do with a sports partnership. But because we were during a really hard time for COVID and economic recovery, we were trying to figure out ways to make sure we were being really culturally relevant and being able to show the features that could help small businesses in partnership with the league. So the players came in and did their own videos about the small businesses they wanted to support. And that was part of our business goal at the time. So it was getting creative too about how we can align on different goals and objectives around that time frame. So it didn't take a lot of convincing. It was just more like, how do we get this done? And with a lot of it being new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you say that it can scale, but maybe in a different way. And I think we are in a time of needing to think a little bit differently beyond, the traditional. I see it in like the page views, which I think is an antiquated way of measuring things, and that's similar in many ways in different fields where, we have. I think we've seen the examples. How many different teams have sold out of women's soccer jerseys this year because they didn't anticipate the demand for them. So we've seen it in different ways for sure. And I want to make sure we have time to get to some questions. So I want to get to this first one that I think can blend in a bit. You can see it on the screen. I think all of you can see it. What would you recommend on how to improve or where to start when it comes to sponsorship in the women's game? And maybe that blends into just something that I wanted to ask anyway of what's next, what's ahead. Lindsay, maybe you want to start on a league level of what are you looking at for the future? What's maybe to come, things that you're trying to work on at a macro level?
Sure. So for 21, I think we're all hoping that the public health situation improves and we can get closer to what we used to consider the norm. And I think for 21, it's all about building on the momentum and the success that we had this year. And we really look to our partners as partners in the true sense of the word, not in I think Jackie's alluded to this, not in just, here are the locations where we can put your logo, but how can we think about partnerships in a way that is mutually beneficial and where we are considering ways where we can add value that is separate from just taking the number of eyeballs and dividing by a CPM. And I talk a lot here elsewhere about how if you are a partner to the NWSL, you are communicating to your current, future customers, your staff, that you support women and you believe that women should be treated with respect and equally. And you think girls and women should have the same opportunity to pursue their dreams as men and boys. But the more I think about that, I think maybe we need to look at it in the reverse and think, what does it say about a brand if they don't support women athletes and women's leagues? What does it say about a brand that has tens of millions of dollars invested in the NFL and the NBA and the other men's leagues, but gives zero or very little money to women athletes and to women's leagues? And maybe there needs to be some accountability and responsibility from those brands who don't consider opportunities to invest in women. And what message are they giving the market about what they think about women, about how they value women? And so it's a larger conversation, far beyond any single league or any single athlete or any single brand tackle. But there needs to be some accountability in the space, because we talk a lot about how women's leagues get 4% of media coverage. Well, I would love to know the equivalent stat for sponsorship and marketing dollars.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a mic drop. Turn the tables a little bit. Well, Jan, anything you want to add to that of how you're maybe positioning from a club level, a top club in Europe, for going forward for partnerships?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Lindsay just said. And I hope we're heading in that kind of direction, that there is kind of an accountability if you don't invest into women's sport and all the values that you're representing with it. And I mean, this is also what we're also trying to use, this momentum that is still there, that we had it here regionally and nationally with our women's team due to the success and also the continuous success that they had. We had the World Cup, which obviously gave a great global push to this whole thing. And we want to take this momentum now and really use it to also help brands with their messages and with the investment into the values that women's soccer represent, like leadership, like empowerment, and all the stories you can tell around that. And if you activate that in the right way, you can really make a great difference for your employees and also for your target group, as Lindsay just said, that you want to reach with it. And I think we're still in the stage, and Jackie said that as well. I mean, we're still kind of there that we also have to educate brands in a way about the potential of women's soccer and how they can use it. But let me just share one example that I really like. We have a partner, doTERRA, from the US, essential oil company. They're teaming up, and this is one of the examples. They're teaming up just with the women's team because they like what they can achieve with that. And it's interesting, and probably you all agree with me there as well. We signed a contract with them last year. It was kind of like last minute for the season, and 1 week later they opened their Germany office in Munich. It was around the time of the World Cup. And of course we said, okay, yeah, we will support that. We will be present. And obviously we would love to have players there, but it was off season, and all our players were actually playing in the World Cup, or they were there watching the World Cup in France. So it was 1 week to this date, and we thought, okay, it would be awesome to have our player Ella Mazar, who is retired now, but was still playing back then because she's from the US, and we thought it's a great fit. She was also in France, and what they did is I asked them 2 days before the event, can we somehow arrange something with you, maybe a video conference? Can we do something around this office opening where we're part of? And they said, yeah, no problem. We already booked a car. We're coming tomorrow. I was like, what? So they drove the whole way from southern France, Ella and Babette Peter, who's probably the most renowned German player and most successful player ever. They came by car 9 hours to Munich, arrived 10 minutes before this office opening, went into the hotel room, put dresses on, went on stage, and made the greatest show I've ever seen. And I think this is also a commitment from the other side, right? The engagement, the access that you're getting to the players and how you can use them, which is just amazing. And we just have to all work together to really create this platform and that, yeah, people notice.
That's an awesome story. That's great to hear, and I'm sure some of our viewers from the US are familiar with Ella. We've got about 2 minutes left here, exactly, I guess now. Want to ask each of you quickly to wrap this up. We've talked about what are we looking at going forward, 2021. If you can summarize maybe in a word or a phrase as it goes of the opportunity for partnership, sponsorship in the women's soccer space. Maybe what's your 1 or 2 sentence elevator pitch, I guess, for our club and league representatives to a brand, and maybe for Jackie in reverse of I don't know why Google, why get involved in women's soccer, but Lindsay, if you want to start, here's what I found. What's going on that front? Google's talking to me in my.
Well, I'll just say quickly for the NWSL, next year, like I said, we are looking to resume back to something that is closer to norm. We're expanding to 10 teams. Louisville's adding. In 22, we will be at 12 teams. We have, Los Angeles has already been announced and a team to be named later, although widely known. And then 23, we're back to the World Cup. So it's 3 exciting years in a row for us, and I think that it's a good time to be involved in women's football.
Lindsay, you can break some news on this panel here.
I'm like biting my tongue.
Jan, what's ahead for Wolfsburg?
Yeah. Similar, as we just said, trying to use the momentum, still build on that success. I mean, I'm pretty sure our women will still provide us with the platform that they are creating for years now. And now it's also our responsibility as an organization and with our partners to use this in the right way and also lead by example and show what is possible in that area. And yeah, as Lindsay said, and even for us, especially for me, the North American market is super interesting. There are some exciting years ahead, and yeah, there's much more to come, and I don't break news here, but stay tuned. So we'll work on a couple of things as well.
Yeah. Well, my Google Pixel talking to me was not product placement, I swear. But Jackie, what are you looking forward to for what's ahead for partnering on the women's soccer space?
Yeah, I think right when you asked that question, I was like, well, let's just get to work. There's so much to do, and it's so exciting. It feels like every day that goes by, there's another idea that we think of ways that we can get really involved. And we're just super excited to have such creative partners and so much opportunity. I think it feels like, oh, people are now starting to really think about investing in women's soccer and football. And I don't think that's the case. It's just more like, how do we now kind of take everything that's changed and evolved and really make something really meaningful together? Like, I wish and hope that all brands and sponsors or potential sponsors hearing us today or in any sort of network from here understand how awesome of an opportunity it is. And we're super excited to stay involved with the league and the athletes and everyone involved.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we're getting the curtain pulled on us, which I'm sure we could talk all day about some of this, and appreciate the comments that we've gotten in the comment section. I'm sure you can find us on whichever social media platform of your choice, Twitter, I'm sure, and LinkedIn and whatnot. And if you're listening and want to try to continue some of the conversation and dive a bit deeper. So thank you to Athens Women's Football Summit for having us, for hosting this conversation. Thank you, Lindsay, Jan, Jackie, for I think an insightful conversation from all different perspectives of club, league, brand, and hopefully everybody enjoyed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.